Welcome to this preview edition for the Internet of Things Made Simple podcast. I'm Larry Boyhumer. Although the actual podcast doesn't launch until November 1st, I wanted to do a couple preview ones just to cover some very timely topics. The first one is about some newscasts that I saw, which actually scared the heck out of me, to be honest. They referred to an article in Bloomberg where some potential spy chips have been put on board Apple and Amazon, as well as other devices, by some Chinese companies. As I mentioned, it's an alleged story because both Apple and Amazon have denied it. So for now, let's assume that it might not have happened. But the idea of it really is scary. They didn't actually try to take over the world with it. This wasn't some kind of Terminator thing going on, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. It was actually for the purposes of espionage, as they were targeting some very key corporations and some potential government networks. They didn't list the devices, but if you think about it, there's a lot of Amazon devices in just about all of our homes. Things from Kindles to Echoes to Alexas to anything else. And in terms of Apple, I don't imagine they were actually targeting iPhones, but they could definitely be targeting Apple TVs, which are in millions of homes and are actually in a lot of corporate boardrooms as well. The idea of it, what it potentially could do, was very eerily similar to Terminator Genisys. If you haven't seen that movie, they launch an operating system very similar to like an iOS. And inside of it, there's some code embedded, which potentially could be malicious. Although it's not the kind of scale that movie was talking about, this potentially could have some impact. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what could happen and what ways we can prevent this. Okay, so in this part, we're going to be talking about preventing such an attack. I first wanted to start out by talking about IoT security. If you read any of my blogs or seen me speak or even spoken to me, you'll know that I've railed very heavily against many IoT devices, namely because security standards aren't being adhered to. Some devices have pretty high security levels, but because they don't come enabled by default, many consumers aren't activating them. Having said that isn't the case for most corporate deployments. If you're talking about using smart grid technology, there is tons of security in place. I know, I've actually worked on many of these projects. The same goes for police cars, traffic light systems. There's many different things that are done, both procedurally as well as keeping the information away from people, stuff like that, to make sure that an actual outside attack is quite difficult. Just because Hollywood might show as being easy, it doesn't mean it's actually easy. However, that wouldn't prevent a potential attack like the one that was mentioned in the article. You can do all you want to prevent people from attacking your device, but if the actual security breach is done inside the device, I'm really not sure what a utility or police force could do. So that means that we have to actually enable security in a different way. And that's security at the plants, that's increased product testing, that's increased product adherence, stuff like that. The first thing we might have to do, which I don't necessarily know is the case, but we might have to, is to move some of this vital device manufacturing back from overseas and move it back to North America where we can have more controlled procedures. The other part we can do is just mandate more testing. So devices have to be tested individually before they're installed. And then overall systems have to be checked before they're launched to customers. And we can even mandate then that customers themselves, like a police force or a municipality or a government, military, they must actually do some testing. Could this prevent every attack? Of course not. There's always going to be some way to attack, but at least it can make it more difficult, and it will definitely help us in the long run. So, should you be worried? I wouldn't say you should be worried, but I would say you should be vigilant. Definitely on your own devices at home, and we're going to cover this much more in podcasts, but you should enable every possible security mechanism there is, changing default usernames and passwords, enabling encryption, doing all of these things. You should also be vigilant as a customer. So if you're thinking as an example, you're a customer of a utility that's sending back and forth information, you should ask them and demand that they actually secure their networks. They are doing it, but the more vigilant you are towards asking them, the better it is. I hope you enjoyed this quick little preview episode. I look forward to having a few more before our launch on November 1st. Thanks again for listening.